Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity to testify. I want to testify just as a Black American today, and I want to first start off by saying that white supremacy is indeed real, but despite the media's obsessive coverage of it, it represents an isolated, uncoordinated, and fringe occurrence within America.
Candace Owens walked into Congress and basically unplugged the entire Democratic narrative machine live on camera. No fluff, no fear, just straight fire.
It's a fringe occurrence that is being used, in my opinion, by Democrats to scare Americans into giving up their votes to a party that can no longer win based on simple ideas, which is why we're seeing so many of these hearings back to back, despite other threats that are facing this nation. I want to reiterate that point. White supremacy is real, just as racism is real, but neither of these ideologies are real in this room. They have become mechanisms for the left to continue to call these hearings and to distract from much bigger issues that are facing this country and which threaten minorities. Much bigger issues that they are responsible for. White nationalism sounds a lot better as a threat than father absence. When are we going to call a hearing on the 74% of single motherhood rate in Black America today? My guess is probably never. Since Democrats are the author of that epidemic, which leaves us, Black Americans, 20 times more likely to end up in prison, 9 times more likely to drop out of high school, and 5 times more likely to lead a life in poverty and to commit crime. White nationalism also sounds a lot better than illiteracy rates. I'm assuming we're never going to call a hearing on that, which is a real epidemic that is facing Black Americans and minority Americans today. An epidemic which, by the way, has a lot closer of a tie to our nation's history of white supremacy. Slave codes in the early 19th century made it illegal for Black Americans to learn to read. Why? Because if slaves could read, they could access information. I don't believe that much has changed. On the most recent National Assessment of Educational Progress, just 17% of Black students scored proficient in reading at a 12th grade level. 83% of Blacks in America were not found proficient in reading at a 12th grade level. Are we going to have a hearing on that? Probably not. White nationalism also sounds a lot better than abortion as a threat, which has resulted in the slaughter of 18 million Black Americans since 1973 and points to a bigger crisis, which is the fact that the Black population growth has stagnated in this country. The crisis that in major cities like in New York, we have more Black babies that are being aborted than born alive. If we're talking about preserving lives and we're talking about white supremacy, we should probably have a conversation about that. But today, in this room, we're going to see Democrats try to connect the dots to white supremacy and the internet. So the question is why? So that people who have absolutely nothing to do with propagating white supremacy are censored, silenced, and controlled. What they are actually after is our permission to censor and silence and control any dissenting voices that go against the mainstream narrative that they wish to propagate. To give a glimpse into just how absurd and expansive the definition of white supremacy has become, I offer to the committee that I have been libeled and smeared by Democrat media cohorts as someone who supports white supremacy. You need but look at me to determine that that just isn't true. Why? Because I routinely say, Black people don't have to be Democrats. I am now considered somebody that is radicalizing people on the internet. What a radical idea. Black people waking up to the abuses and the Democrat Party, which has been instigated upon Black America over the last 60 years. There have been sincere attempts, just so everybody...
Then she shifts gears and pulls back the curtain on what these hearings really aim to do. Use the label, white supremacy, as a catch-all excuse to justify censorship.
...knows to censor me on social media because I am radical. YouTube once censored me for criticizing Black Lives Matter. They reversed the censorship and they apologized and they called it a mistake. Facebook once censored me for calling out liberal supremacy as a threat facing Black America. What I said specifically was that in any community where liberal policies reign supreme, you will find that Black America is hurting. I stand by that assessment. Facebook reversed my censorship, apologized, and claimed it was a mistake. Of course, I'm fortunate that I have a big enough platform that when I get branded something extreme, I can reverse it, but the majority of Americans don't have that platform. The majority of Americans with dissenting opinions are silenced forever. Many words which have once held very serious meanings have come to take on a different definition over the last couple of years, as Democrats have desperately tried to grapple with the fact that they are no longer able to manipulate Americans with broad claims and broad strokes of racism, sexism, misogyny, and the like. Words like racism, which today most nearly means anything or anyone that disagrees with a liberal, and terms like white nationalism, which today and in this room and upon this floor most nearly means that it's election time, America. It's time for the left to do what they do best: divide, distract, and hope to keep their most important voting bloc to their party, which is Black Americans, angry and emotional and reactive enough to keep voting for the same party that has systematically destroyed our families, sent our men to prison, and deferred all of our dreams. I would close out by telling you that this is not going to work. America, and more importantly, Black America, is waking up to the ploy. The bad acting, the faux concern, these hearings, it's not going to stop Black America from breaking the chains of victimhood, and it's certainly not going to stop me from being one of the loudest voices against it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for your testimony. Dr. Ballou, let me start with you. I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes. In your prepared testimony, you stated that the perpetrators of white supremacist violence in a lot of the recent episodes are often portrayed as bad apples or mentally ill or so on. And this gets us to a very difficult problem. I'm thinking about two relatively analogous episodes. One is of Omar Mateen, who was an admirer or a follower of ISIS, but he wasn't a member of ISIS, and apparently he'd had no contact with them that anybody could determine. He hadn't been trained by them, he hadn't plotted with them, but he followed them online, and then he went to the nightclub, the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, and assassinated 49 people. Then the terrorist who killed 11 people at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, he also radicalized on the internet as essentially a follower of different white supremacist groups. But I don't think he was a member of any of those groups. I don't think he was trained by any of those groups. And so, we're far more inclined to describe someone like that as...
She wraps her testimony with a shot straight at the heart of the Democratic strategy. Black America is waking up. Not to racism, not to phantom boogeymen, but to the political manipulation that has kept entire communities voting the same way while conditions stay the same, or get worse. And that's the moment you realize this wasn't just testimony, it was a declaration of independence. Candace Owens' testimony wasn't just bold, it was revealing. It exposed a deeper truth about the way political narratives operate in America. Politicians don't fear white supremacy. They fear losing control. They fear losing their monopoly on outrage. They fear losing the ability to weaponize fear during election cycles. They fear dissent, especially when that dissent comes from the communities they depend on most. And that's why her voice is treated as a threat, not because she's dangerous, but because she's effective. Candace forced Congress to confront something they desperately avoid. The real issues hurting Black Americans have nothing to do with the boogeyman they want to blame. Fatherlessness isn't caused by online forums. Illiteracy isn't caused by right-wing memes. Crime isn't caused by conservative speech. And 18 million aborted Black children didn't come from extremists in chat rooms. These are problems rooted in policy, leadership, and decades of political negligence, and she put a spotlight right on it. But here's the bigger picture. We're entering an era where Americans, Black, white, Hispanic, doesn't matter, are starting to question the narratives they're fed. They're no longer willing to accept fear as a substitute for facts. They're starting to realize that censorship is not protection, it's control. Candace's testimony marks a turning point. Not because she changed minds in that room, she didn't. They weren't listening. But because she spoke past them, to the millions watching who can feel that something is off in the way our political system handles threats. Her message is basically this. If your leaders keep telling you the biggest danger in your life is something that has never affected you, maybe the real danger is your leaders. And that's why this moment matters. Not because Candace Owens made a scene, but because she shattered a narrative that relies on people never thinking for themselves. If more Americans start questioning the stories they're told, if more minority voters start asking where the results are, if more people refuse to be manipulated by fear, then the entire political landscape shakes. And Congress knows it. If you want more breakdowns like this, and if you're tired of the same recycled narratives, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments.